Welcome, everybody.
Hey, hey.
Work smarter where you want.
This is learning at its most fun.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Haley Mandrup. I'm one of the trainers with Redtail, and I'm so excited. I'm not even joking. I'm so excited for today's webinar because today we're hearing from Kate Guillen, who I'll call you a personal friend. You're a great friend of mine through Redtail and just I think personally as well. You're someone I respect personally and professionally. So I think you all are in for a real treat today to learn about Redtail from the perspective of someone who's not only been in your shoes in an office, but has now moved on and is helping many offices streamline and just create operational efficiencies within their practices, all surrounding within that Redtail platform. So I'm really excited for it. I'm excited to share Kate with you and for you to hear all of these tips and tricks and best practices. Kate's going to give a little bit more of her background and kind of how, how this webinar came to be. And I definitely get a notepad and pen ready for today's webinar, folks. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Kate. And go ahead.
Awesome. Thanks, Haley. Well, I appreciate the introduction. It's been really fun to get to know you and become friends over the last several years. I appreciate the hundreds of hours of guidance and training that you have spent with me. It has paid off, I think. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today and attending today's webinar. As Haley said, my name is Kate Guillen, and today I'm going to share with you my experience as a longtime Redtail user and some tips and tricks that I have learned along the way for a practical application of various office procedures through Redtail workflows. So first, I'm going to give you just a quick little background and history of myself as a Redtail user. I was first introduced to Redtail as the operations manager for an RIA here in Southern California. At the time, we were really only using Redtail for, kind of compliance-related requirements, logging notes, email correspondences. We kept, obviously, all of our client contact data within the Redtail, but we really weren't using Redtail for much more than that. But lucky for me, after being on the job for a couple of months, I was able to attend one of the Redtail universities. And hopefully when the world gets back to normal and we're able to gather in large groups again, you all will have the chance to attend one of Redtail's fabulous training events. Not only are the trainers funny and captivating speakers, but they really give you a crash course in all things Redtail and provide you, or at least for me, a much better understanding of just all that the system's capable of. And let me tell you, it's a whole lot more than just logging client emails and notes for compliance purposes. So anyway, when I left Redtail University, after having learned about all of the features that I was not taking advantage of, my wheels were spinning. I was super encouraged and committed to mastering the system, learning about all of the available integrations, and really utilizing the tool to help solve some of the operational issues that were currently affecting our firm. Without going into too much detail, at the time, it was a little bit crazy in our office. We were in a hyper growth mode. We hired a new advisor, a portfolio manager, a client service associate, all while leaving our camp and consolidating custodians. So to put it nicely, we had a lot of balls in the air. So to help make the transition as seamless as possible for my new team members, I started writing and building out workflows and a task management system to manage all of our client service, practice management, marketing, and human resources type responsibilities. And in the end, and this is where I spent hundreds of hours with Haley learning how to make all of this happen. And it was a lot of work, but in the end, the system of workflows and some of these other operational efficiencies like calendar management software really started to streamline our firm's operational procedures. It eliminated the potential for, silly balls being dropped, and we were really able to take our client servicing to the next level, all while going through this transition. So kudos to Redtail and to Haley for spending all that time with me to help make that possible for my team. So fast forward to today, I started Simplicity Ops as a way to offer my expertise to advisors and their teams to help automate their internal operational procedures, eliminate a lot of the manual work being done by advisors and their teams, and really start to elevate their client experience. Since starting Simplicity Ops, I've had the privilege of working with some very successful firms all over the country to help scale their practice in an effort to become a highly efficient firm. So today, what I'm going to share with you is kind of a piece of that system that I help firms implement in terms of a practical application of Redtail workflows. So getting started, and feel free to ask questions as we go through this. I'm happy to answer questions as we go. But to get started, some of you may have already started to create these processes within Redtail, and if so, good for you, you're a couple steps ahead of us. But for those of you who were like me when I first got started with Redtail, we're gonna start at square one and take it from the base up. And for me, square one is creating a solid foundation within Redtail to then be able to incorporate things like workflows, automations, and various integrations. Unfortunately, you don't get to just skip to the fun part and start writing workflows right out the gate. You actually have to put in, a little bit of elbow grease to get the system well enough organized to then support those types of features. But I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview now of how we're going to do that before we actually get into the practical application part. So first, anybody still using Post-its as reminders? Guilty. Don't worry, Post-its for me were one of the very last things to go when we started to implement Redtail as a an organizational tool within our practice. But let me tell you, life becomes infinitely easier when we start getting things off of Post-its, out of Excel documents, and written checklists, and really get everything into Redtail and allow Redtail to become the hub of our practice. So to do this, we're going to start with organizing our service model. Start asking questions like, what is your desired client experience? For some of you, this information might be in your head. For others, you have it on written checklists or Excel docs. But regardless, we're going to document that as a way to then create activities within Redtail to start proactively driving your client experience. So the next thing we're going to do after we've identified kind of our ideal client experience, we need to do a little bit of Redtail organization. We need to make sure that all of our contacts in Redtail are labeled, especially our active clients, and have the active clients been segmented, and are they categorized within Redtail? Do you have activities for your active clients to remind you or help manage your proactive meeting or client contact schedule? So once you kind of have that, dialed in Redtail, we can start doing what I think is the fun part in brainstorming workflows. Start thinking about what are things in your, what are some of your daily responsibilities that we can start to write workflows around. And after you've kind of jotted down a list a little bit, then we can start actually writing out the details of how to do those things, which essentially is what a workflow is. Start thinking about some of your daily responsibilities and, who are the players and what are the pieces that need to be done in order to run a review meeting. So we'll kind of get into a little bit more detail on that, but high level, these are kind of the big, items we need to check off first before we're able to get into the workflow creation part. Okay, so let's start with service model. And this looks different for every firm, but I'm going to kind of run you through the way I start writing a service model to get started. The first question I ask myself is, who do we serve? You know, what are the different segments? You know, do you call them A, B, C, D, you know, tier 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, platinum, gold, silver, bronze, whatever. But we then need to define that even more and say, you know, let's create a list of all the services that we provide. And start thinking about, do the services vary based on, you know, their segment, or do you serve everybody equally? And then, are these services proactive or are they reactive? And then does that also vary based on, you know, where they fall in your book of business? And then lastly, what is the frequency at which you are providing these services? Start thinking about all of these things. I'm sure a lot of you have an idea, but what I like to do is really jot this down in a organized spreadsheet, you know, for me to be able to get all the information out of my head and to be able to share it with my team and have a resource for your team to look back on if anybody has any questions on, you know, who it is, you know, how often do we meet with our platinum clients or what have you. So let's start here with a blank slate, and we'll start to write this out together. And so I'm going to go back to the first question that we asked, in that, you know, who do we serve? So, you know, we'll just use this hypothetical situation. After looking at our book of business, I've identified 4 groups within my practice based on a few determining factors. Let's just say, you know, assets under management, likability, you know, are they a good referral source, et cetera. For the sake of this exercise, I'm going to call them platinum, gold, silver, and bronze. So top level, we've organized who it is that we serve. Now let's write a list of all of the services that we provide. And when I do this, I create a comprehensive list of every service that I provide for every person within my book of business, regardless of, you know, their net worth or kind of what segment they fall in my book, because we're gonna break this down even further here and organize it. But I like to start with one long laundry list to start creating the service model off the bat.
And we're not going
so
far at this point, right, Kate? Like, we're just saying these are the ways that I interact with my clients. It's not as deep as like email versus physical mailing or anything at this point, right?
Well, yes, I will. Yeah. Let me show you in 2 clicks how I would go that deep.
Okay.
For a couple of reasons. I think, you know, I was an administrative person. As an administrative person, and I got 100 emails a day, and, you know, I had to look at the incoming emails to identify who are the people I need to get back to first. Yeah. And in our service model, we got back to our top clients within 24 hours, preferably, you know, day of. So I would look through my emails, and unfortunately we did. You had to put a $ associated with these different relationships. And it helped me prioritize what needed to be done first, second, third, and fourth. So I would put that level of detail in your service model. So, you know, for a lot of advisors, all of this is in their head. And, you know, you can't expect that the rest of your team has access to that information unless you document it, you know, on a spreadsheet or in some sort of, you know, even in Redtail. So I would, to answer your question, Haley, include that much detail. So back to organizing this spreadsheet, after we've identified who we serve, what are the services we provide, I add the different breakpoints for a couple of different reasons. And, you know, for the sake of this example, you know, this firm works with a lot of really high net worth clients, and we've organized their breakpoints like this. This is really the first level of organizing kind of who is who within your CRM. But now that you've identified what makes somebody platinum, gold, silver, and bronze, we can run reports in Redtail to, you know, with the portfolio value associated with these different contacts, and easily, you know, as a bulk action, assign a category to these different contacts. So this really needs to be done as part of, not only the service model, but for the Redtail cleanup. We'll address that here in a couple minutes. But now so to your point here, Haley, let's fill in the blanks here. Let's do a little bit more organizing. So here's your answer to your question. So for the platinum clients, we call them 4 times a year. And for our silver clients, we're sending them an email a year. So that's kind of the difference that we see here. The platinum people are hearing from us live versus the silver clients might just be getting, one proactive email from us. And then the bronze people, we're fielding phone calls as they come in, but we're not doing any proactive servicing at all. And then to my same point here, we can see that the expected response time for these different segments is broken down here. So the service model is going to be really helpful for a couple of different reasons. One, it helps me start to brainstorm some of those workflowable processes in our day-to-day responsibilities. Things like a review meeting, things like sending a newsletter. This really helps me start to look at my list of services and start to get my wheels spinning a little bit on how many of these different pieces can we start to write workflows around to help proactively drive that process. And also, like I said, this is a great tool for the rest of your team to have as a resource to see who it is that we service and how do we service them. Especially new hires. I always review the service model with new hires so that everybody's on the same page and they understand, right out of the gate, exactly what I just said, who we serve and how we service them. So, moving forward, we've identified, who it is that we serve, how we're going to service them. We need to get this organized in Redtail, which is, a necessary evil. Might not be the funnest part, but we do need to have Redtail well organized in order to make, all of this happen. So let's talk about Redtail Organization. The good news is, if your Redtail was like mine, it was a little bit messy and it was a little bit daunting to think about cleaning up, 3,000 contacts in the database. So I would break it out into bite-sized chunks. And the first bite-sized chunk that I would suggest, or your most important contacts being your active clients. So to do this, we're going to start with assigning statuses. At minimum, every contact in your database needs to have a status. The status field within Redtail is the highest level of organization used to identify a contact. They are, the status is mutually exclusive, so every contact can only have one status at a time. So, you might look at your data and be like, gosh, how the heck am I supposed to know what my different statuses are? And so I look at it kind of from the view of who are the different contacts in my database. You obviously have your clients in there. You might have business contacts in there. I started to jot down the list here, children of clients. Start to look at, just like we did categorizing who the different segments of people are, let's look at who the different contacts are and start to write a list of statuses out. And my advice to you when you start to write that list of statuses is keep the list as short as possible to avoid, any confusion or the possibility for a contact to maybe be 2 statuses. So, the purpose being when somebody new goes to add a new contact, it is clear as day that they're either an active client or they're a business contact. You don't want to have 45 statuses where somebody could be confused because the contact could potentially be 2.
We usually see 12 or less if we were to put a number on it in my experience. And just to share a funny joke, you've heard it a million times, Kate, and if you've watched any of our Redtail trainings, I'm sure you've heard it too, but I like to call it your relationship status. The first thing you do when your relationship status changes is you go to Facebook and change your relationship status, right? And then you also only have one of them. If you're married and you're single, generally you're doing something wrong. So I think as that relationship status, what matters the most, right, Kate?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good number too. I like that. The goal being 12 or less. I think that's pretty spot on. And I think if you can get your list of statuses down to 12 or less, you got a pretty well-oiled machine there. So we'll start with status being the highest level of organization, and then now let's further define these contacts in Redtail by assigning a category. So a category in Redtail then is the second level of organization used to rank contacts within your CRM. So once they have a status, you can then assign a category which clarifies their rank. Categories are also mutually exclusive, so contacts can only have one category at a time. And when I go to create categories, and even statuses for that matter too, I look at that through kind of a reporting lens. I look at it from the place of, what contact reports am I going to want to run based on the data that I have within Redtail. Let's just a couple examples. Okay, so I want to run a list of all of my active clients. Okay, but then I am having some posh lunch, and I really only want to invite my platinum clients to that. So I want to have an active client list that filters then by platinum clients only. So that's what I mean in terms of looking at this from the lens of reporting. What contact reports are you going to want to run? On that last slide, we had a prospect as a status. You might want to run a list of all of your prospects, but shoot, you have, old prospects that you're no longer pursuing. You have people that didn't become a client, so I really only want to see my top prospects that I'm currently actively pursuing. And that's why here I have it broken down by hot and cold. My hot prospects are the people that I'm actively pursuing, and my cold prospects are, they weren't a good fit. They didn't meet our firm minimum, or we got a weird vibe from them, and we decided to, not take the relationship any further. So we indicate them as cold prospects. I keep cold prospects in the database because I've had communication with them. I have notes on them. Even though we're no longer actively pursuing them, if they were to call back in 10 years and say, hey, I came into a giant inheritance and I want to continue the conversation with you, I don't want to look, disorganized because I don't have any clue who this person is. I still want to be able to pull up their information within Redtail. So I wouldn't just remove cold prospects altogether. I would still keep them in there because you've had some sort of contact with them.
And you can always utilize their contact info for like a drip campaign later, or maybe you've added
absolutely
a service you want to advertise. Now, as far as categories go, I know your structure here is like an example, but I think this is a really good example for a couple of reasons. We want to keep it simple, right? I was working with an office a couple weeks ago, and there were like 15 categories just for the prospect status. And they were all very complicated, scheduled meeting completed, but no follow-up, second meeting, but no third meeting. And it got so confusing that it was trying to keep track of information that really workflows and activities support. So this is really just to tell you at a bird's eye view where that person is at with the practice, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. And I'm with you. The cleaner and more concise this list can be, and this is just an example, nobody's category list is this short, but the less confusion there's going to be, like you just said, in tagging somebody based on where they fall in the prospecting process. It's overcomplicating things. I'm of the mindset to work smarter and not harder. So the cleaner and shorter this list can be, the easier it's going to be for the rest of your team to follow. And as we know, if we know one thing about Redtail, the data coming out is only as good as the data going in. So let's make sure the data going in is nice and tidy and nice and clean. Okay, we're going to move forward to my personal favorite part, which is brainstorming workflows. So now that we have contacts organized within Redtail, we can start whiteboarding, as Redtail would call it, or brainstorming workflows. So the way I see it, in terms of workflows is any repeatable process within your daily responsibilities is workflowable. I know it's a made-up term, but you know what I mean. We can write a workflow around any repeatable process. So let's brainstorm some repeatable processes that you see occurring in your daily responsibilities. First one that comes to mind for me is client onboarding. I would suggest that you have a workflow for each different meeting from, the time you meet the prospect to the time, you set them up with a proactive review schedule. I would have an individual workflow for each one of those different meetings. Just as an example, your initial qualifying phone call, the first meeting that you have them in the office or virtual as we do now, your paperwork signing meeting, your financial planning meeting, and then your regular review cycle. Those are all repeatable things that we can write a workflow around. And then other examples of workflows are, some of your client servicing responsibilities, things like a Benny change or an address change or a contribution or distribution. And then I'll take a look outside of client servicing responsibilities and think about things, within the practice management or marketing realm, like billing, reporting. How about putting together a seminar or putting together, an educational client event? All of those are other examples of, repeatable processes that would be helpful to have a checklist or a workflow in place to help guide that process. And then lastly, I do always write workflows around human resources responsibilities. It doesn't happen often, but when you hire or unfortunately have to let somebody go, it's nice to have that process documented so that you're not having to reinvent the wheel every time you go to do something like this. And so, my goal to what I just said, when I write a workflow, is not having to reinvent the wheel every time you go to do one of these things. Some of these tasks are done very regularly, like, you could probably put together a review meeting in your sleep. But some of these things are done very infrequently, like processing a death claim. And if you're like me, you spend more time looking up, how I processed the last death claim than I actually do processing the death claim. So that's where I have found workflows to be super helpful and improve overall efficiency with helping run these repeatable processes. So we've all been here, too busy to, create workflows and really build out these types of processes for our teams. But I guarantee you, in the long run, if you sink in the time to brainstorm these things, create your list, do a little bit of Redtail organization, and start to write out your internal operational procedures, that you're going to save yourself so much time in the long run, never having to reinvent the wheel ever again. You'll be glad that you had done the work up front to save yourself time in the long run, I guess. So before, I'm going to move out of this slideshow and over to the database here really quick, but I want to start to talk about my thought process in actually creating a workflow. So I always start by asking myself, what is it that we're going to do first, second, third, fourth, what have you, okay? I like, Redtail is going to hate me for saying this, but, some workflows only have one step. They're a single step or like a checklist. And sorry, Haley, you're really not going to like me giving this piece of advice, but there's just some things in my day-to-day activities that there's not a first, a second, a third, and a fourth. And I'll give you an example. So sending a newsletter, okay? Sending a newsletter, you got to, generate your contacts, put the content together, get it uploaded into MailChimp, send it out, whatever, okay? I'm going to do all those things in one day. I don't need to have a prompt to do it 5 days before and then do it the day of and then follow up. This is just a checklist, kind of a guide, a how-to guide of how I send my newsletter. So to me, that's just a single step workflow or a checklist that I like to keep in Redtail, because Redtail is where I keep all of my stuff. So I do, in my world, creating a single step workflow is a-okay. And if you need to keep checklists in Redtail, I say you do it. Just don't tell Haley.
I totally support it. I know
it might not be your advice, but it's not gonna break the system, if you will.
When we think of workflows, you're right. We think of, 50 steps and 100 tasks and very complex processes. But you're totally right. It can handle something that's very simple. And it's taking the pressure off, right? If it's taking the pressure off, I don't really care how you use it. If it's taking the responsibility of you remembering what goes first and what goes second, put it in Redtail. You're right.
Exactly. Yeah. Workflows to me are my crutch. Some of the stuff I like preparing for a review meeting, I can do in my sleep. But, things that I'm doing infrequently, I like to have that crutch. Like, gosh, what did I do last time? So that I'm not having to dig up. I spend so much time sifting through the server or trying to figure out who I just processed something for. And so I like to capture all of this in Redtail as my crutch, as my how-to guide of what needs to be done to get, X, Y, and Z accomplished. So for the sake of this example, let's build a review meeting workflow. So I'll use another example. A wise Redtail trainer, Haley, gave me this example as I began my workflow writing journey. And I use it as an example with a lot of firms. I get giggles, but it makes sense. It helps, make sense of what we need to be doing for second, third, and fourth. So the example that Haley gave me a couple of years ago was, let's say this weekend you needed to run some errands. You need to go to Target, you need to go to Home Depot, and you need to go to the supermarket. Before heading out, you think through the most logical way to get all of those things accomplished without having to, go back and forth. And you identify that, Target is the furthest away from your house. So you're going to go to Target first, and you want to go to the supermarket last because you don't want your ice cream to melt in your car. So there you have it. We were going to Target, we're going to go to Home Depot, and then we're going to go to the supermarket. So, and I use that as an example because we're going to do one before we're going to be able to do the other, before we're going to be able to do the other. We know we're going to go to Target first, but you can do your Target related responsibilities in any order. You can pick up your TP before you pick up your shampoo, before you shop the shoe section, in whatever order. But you're not going to leave Target until your Target related responsibilities are finished. So for the sake of this review meeting workflow, we have those same 3 steps. We have the prep, we have the day of responsibilities, and then we have our follow-up responsibilities. So that here is our initial framework for building out this Redtail or this review meeting workflow. We've created the framework. We know what we're doing first, second, third. But what I was saying is I like to write these workflows to follow my most ideal situation. And I know not every day goes according to your most ideal situation, but I like to have workflows kind of follow that. And, especially like the timeline. In an ideal situation, the advisors are going to prep 5 days ahead of the meeting, and you're going to get meeting material printed 5 days ahead of the meeting. The conference room prep is obviously it needs to happen on day of. And then the follow-up, it would be nice to get it done day of, but if it happens the next day, so be it. So I write the timeline according to the most ideal situation. And then I also include as much detail as possible in each one of these steps and I don't know if this is one of the parts that broke out when I was just talking, to help, if I was a newbie on your team and I got the task, I'm the new CSA, and I got the task and it said print meeting material. I have no idea what your meeting material is. So I bullet out every piece of information that person could possibly need to help them be effective in their role. So I'm going to go here now and show you kind of an example of what I'm talking about. So Redtail has us all figured out, and they have given us the capability to embed live links to things in our server. live links to the TD Ameritrade website. So if I'm the new CSA on the team and I get the task that says, print the meeting material, I've got here, you go to the stack of papers icon on the client's contact page and you select personal profile form and you print it out. I've also included a live link here to the Redtail help desk to show that person, exactly how to do that. I've included a link here to, where the meeting agenda lives in our server. And then I've included a link here to the TD Ameritrade website so that the client service person can look up RMD information very, very easily. And so the reason that I include as much detail as I do is for a couple of reasons. Not just because I'm neurotic, but in my experience, the more information that you give your team, the better equipped everybody is to manage these responsibilities independently. And it's also a fabulous way to delegate responsibilities among your team and rest assured that your clients are going to be served as well by the rest of your team as they are served by you. So, as you look here, I'm gonna scroll down a little bit. You have your conference room prep responsibilities. You could pull this up and open up the firm website. These are all live links to what the CSA needs to do to prep the conference room. And then as part of the follow-up, like me, I'm the advisor, I own the firm, and I'm writing templates to, help my team, be more efficient, copy and paste this into their email, and also help, streamline our client communication. So I'll give you another example of how workflows really helped me transition, as I was talking about that kind of hectic transition period in our office, how, keeping as much information as you can and as much detail as you can really helps benefit my team during that time. And at the moment, I was the most senior person on the team. I knew where things were in the server, and people heavily relied on me for just about everything. Where do I find this? How do I do that? What do I need to be doing next? Where do I find this in the server?
I have a great question here. If I can ask a question from Greg. In the listed prep for the meeting, when the step might mean 5 other things, what's the best practice thought process for less versus more detail? So you're kind of going over that now, but just to the question specifically, what's better? Way too much or not enough? Like, how do you find that sweet spot for your office, or how did you find it for yours?
Yeah, so I always included as much detail as possible without including too much. I guess there's kind of a fine line, including too much detail that it was overwhelming. So if I am the operations person or the advisor, and I know, hey, going into a meeting, I want, I'm the advisor leading the meeting. I want to see, the agenda. I want a list of their bennies, and I want, their RMD information. I write these workflows to help my team provide me with what I need to be effective in that meeting. So if you don't need 100 things as part of your meeting, don't include 100 things in your workflow. If you need 5 things, include those 5 things. And clearly articulate to your team, these are the 5 things that I need for my meeting. But if you have time to put together 10 things, I would write out 5 things must have, and then 5 things would be nice if you have the time. But I would, work smarter, not harder, keep things clean and concise. So if you don't need all 10 things in your meeting, I would include all 10 things for your meeting. I would keep these steps clean and concise with the exact information that you need to be effective. Did I help answer that question?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to my example here really quick of when we were going through that transition. We had a bunch of new people on that team, and I really wrote out these workflows to, alleviate the constant interruptions that I was having from people coming to me and saying, hey, where do I find this in the server? And, to eliminate that happening, I embedded links to the different documents in our server, so that person would never be confused as to where to find something or what needed to be done next. So and in the long run, this was just a huge time saver for everybody. Help with time management, help with becoming more efficient, and helping with overall impeccable client service. So just one other example, if I haven't given you enough reasons why I love workflows, and I suggest that everybody have a whole series of workflows in their database, is exactly what we're going through right now, with more and more of us having to work remotely and not being able to be in the office collaborating. It's really helpful to have a well-organized system in place to help keep people on track, so that we don't miss a beat. There's no opportunity for something slipping through the crack, and continue business as usual in a remote environment. So if I can give you one piece of advice, it is spend the time now to brainstorm, to start writing your repeatable processes that are in your world that you can start writing workflows around. They're a huge time saver and a great organizational tool that I think benefits every firm. As the founder of Simplicity Ops, it is my goal to help advisors and their teams with creating an organizational structure like we just talked about within Redtail to help elevate your client experience. Start to streamline some of your internal operational procedures and eliminate a lot of the manual work being done by you and your team in an effort to become more efficient and ultimately free up your time to be doing more of what it is that you love to do. We at Simplicity Ops, we do offer a wide range of services, helping improve firms' current operational procedures, and creating custom systems based on your client service model and kind of how your firm operates. And I'd be happy to kind of discuss that with you, as well as importing, if you're interested in just the bones of workflows, I'd be happy to help you import those too. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you do have any additional questions about the services that we offer, or any other topic that kind of came up in today's webinar. I'm more than happy to offer my expertise to anyone looking to organize Redtail, really dial in their internal procedures, start to automate daily responsibilities, and use Redtail and some of the available tech and integrations to help streamline your daily functions, and really take advantage of workflows, automations, like I said, integrations, and additional operational efficiencies, and really use Redtail as a tool to help drive your operational processes.
Thanks so much for joining us today for this particular session. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call at 800-206-5030, option 3 for support, or just shoot us an email over to support@redtailtechnology.com. Thanks a lot and have a great day.